Hello, everyone. Bienvenidos a todos who are coming into this cluster discussion on philanthropy in South America. My name is Nick Deychakiwsky. I'm a senior program officer at the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. And with me is Magdalena Aninat, who from CEFIS, the Center of Philanthropy and Social Investment at the Adolfo Ibañez University in Santiago, Chile. Magdalena is a scholar of philanthropy, not only in Chile, but throughout Latin America, certainly in South America. And she is also a board member of WINGS, the Worldwide Network of Philanthropy Associations. So here we're going to try to discuss, I have a lot of questions for you, Magdalena. Let's move where I'm asking your views on some important trends going on to get people thinking, because after 20 minutes or so of us talking, then we would like to then engage with the rest of the audience that are joining us today. So Magdalena, what is the most significant impact?
Thank you, Nick, for the invitation, and thank you for being, I'm very glad to be part of this discussion on international philanthropy and this encounter. So, hola a todos, muy bienvenidos.
Okay, thank you, Magdalena. Let's jump into what has been on everybody's mind and the difficulties we're facing. What has been the most significant impact that COVID-19 has had on philanthropy and on civil society in South America recently?
Well, first of all, as around the world, the impact of this pandemic, the economic crisis related to the pandemic left millions of people unemployed, without income, and the effects on housing and education. And philanthropy has been, of course, impacted by this reality. It has changed in the focus of donors. Especially last year, I would say, there was an active activity around business companies, donors, family enterprises, and citizens moving to, as in any catastrophe, to get immediate aid, food supplies, education connection to people in need. And it was very interesting, I would say, sort of a change that we really are not used to see in the region, is to see collaborations. We see a lot of names, companies out there with their logos, and we saw a lot of initiative of collective funds, which was very interesting in Chile, in Colombia, in Brazil, in Argentina. Collective funds putting together money from companies, from private foundations, working together also with government, providing like the efficiency of the private sector to governments that work slowly. So that is one effect that we see. We also see a side effect that other issues like climate change, racism, corruption, culture were deferred, and now is the time that we're looking, at least in Chile, with a strong vaccination program, on economic going up again. So we're seeing like this reflection on how philanthropy can collaborate to get out of all this crisis, and something that is, I think, another side effect that is relevant is that all this crisis and the movement of civil society and philanthropy, very active, providing services, social services where needed, help to put awareness on the role of civil society for societies as well, for democracy. And that is something that is very relevant and maybe different from the US, but it's very important in countries like this, where we frequently are civil society and philanthropy have sort of a suspicion from the government, including from public opinion. The Global Philanthropy Report some years ago from this initiative from Harvard University outlined this reality in 2015 about the suspicion around philanthropy that you will find in these countries. So that opens sort of an opportunity to have a bigger role.
Well, so not all is bad news in that there is increased collaboration and, in fact, increased trust towards civil society. At the same time, and you mentioned, possibility of cooperation with governments, but there is political and social instability in many South American countries, including yours. And I'm wondering how that is affecting what philanthropy is doing now in South America.
Well, this is not good news for South America and for the people, for the inhabitants here, because we know the most affected ones are always people that live in vulnerable conditions by political instability. Neither is good news for civil society. And, prior to the pandemic, Wings, in a study Wings published, said one of the concern is that civic space is shrinking with more restrictions from government. So you will find around the region different realities, of course, and that is something that we should get concerned, because political instability affects the role that can play civil society. Civil society can conduct or be a convener and help to build stronger democracy, but can also be affected by governments that feel afraid of this civil society. We see the example very clearly on Venezuela. We're hearing this news from Brazil as well. So it's something that it should really concern us on the role of this environment for the sector.
Yes, thank you. I mean, just as we often talk of sharing best practices, governments sometimes share their worst practices as well.
Yes, and we are always talking about what philanthropy can do, like deploying services or making changes, but we should also concern about the environment, like to build an environment where philanthropy can unlock all its potential. And you see political context and tax treatment that are very related, are very important. That is something that the Global Philanthropy Environment Index from Indiana University measures and shows that is one of the issues that in our region is not very solid, especially like countries like Venezuela, Ecuador, and Peru.
Okay. In fact, that begs the question of what we'd call the organizational infrastructure for philanthropy, or even more broadly for civil society, which one of its roles is to try to engender a stronger legal framework for both philanthropy and civil society. What is the state of that kind of organizational infrastructure in South America? Like, where are the bright spots and where are the blank spots?
In this, you can always look at the glass half empty or half full, Let me see it half full. And I would say that if you look a decade ago, we are far more better now. We have more associations of foundations. We have some initiatives of the region, Latin Pacto, a new network for impact investors and venture philanthropy. We are, and with people from Colombia, Peru, and Mexico, and Argentina, are in an initiative for strengthening institutional philanthropy. You will find associations and institutions in Brazil, in Colombia, in Chile, and Argentina. So we're seeing more people, more institutions with important leaders engaged, working to strengthen philanthropy, as you mentioned. But my fear is that we're working too much focus on capability, on our memberships, and we need to work on a continuing basis on making the case for the value of philanthropy and the value of civil society. Not to react when a government or authority comes and put restrictions, but to work continually on that spot. And I think that is something that we're still lacking. When you look at this global research that Wings provides on how is the state of the world in philanthropy, you will see that, for example, Latin America is the country that has least research on and least data on how is the state of the art in this area.
Let me shift just a little bit. Thank you for that. Let me shift to a little bit more on what domestic philanthropy in South America is focused on. I mean, a lot of what was civil society worked on, to my best knowledge, that was oriented on social justice issue, had been used to international aid for support. As that international aid has receded, which I think it has over time, has domestic philanthropy picked up the slack?
Slowly, I would say, very slowly. And I would say that there was more a tradition on, like, a charitable tradition, let's say, to and Catholic based, very low profile, very providing the basic needs and not addressing really systemic change. So you would say, yes, you find people working on social issues, but not as well in social justice. And I wonder, when we look back in history and the role that international aid, the strong role it had in different issues, let's say human rights, at least in Chile, I wonder if the role they had should have included also that to make the case to build local support for systemic change, to convene with local elites, to build the field for philanthropic leaders to concern on these issues. I think we have some light in the horizon when we look at these next gen donors, that they have inherited a lot of wealth. They are more focused on a philanthropy that is more professional philanthropy. This is just as important as their business role, and they are looking for impact. So they will not just give, let's say, the laptop for kids to connect to school, but they will invest in the education communities, impact public policy for more equality in education. So they are looking for this overall issue. And we're seeing, and I think the pandemic, the social crisis, we have this big social crisis in Chile, one of the most stable countries in the region, and this has had a lot of reflection on philanthropies. So they are looking on how to empower grassroots leaders that have been very important in articulating their neighbors, not just providing like a bottom-down issues, but you see some spots on local leaders changes. But I think it's very important, and since we're talking on innovation and international philanthropy, that there's a lot of opportunities here in the region. You will find all the issues that you need, communities that need a lot of support, but they are willing to work with donors, not just to receive something. So it is sort of a change that we're seeing around the world, that people need to be part of their own solution and their own way to go through. They would like to have help, but they will need to be part of that. And I think that is something that is important for international donors as well as to local donors. More collaboration and articulation is the way to go now. And I think it is different from what we have seen back in our history.
Yeah, well, it sounds to me like that is a really wonderful opportunity for longer term impact if international funders partner with local funders to support those causes, and there's some real great learning that can take place that way. I wonder if also is philanthropy becoming a little bit more localized in South America? By that I mean, are they becoming more, are local domestic philanthropists becoming more interested in funding where they live?
I think donors in the region, you will find donors that are very concerned on their countries, like their countries. And we are just starting to see a concern that is more related to a lower level, the community, which is different. We are very used to see to develop a program on education that fits for all the reality around the country. We don't have a lot of exchange between countries in the region, and we think we're sort of which is the reality, a very diverse country and a diverse region. So I think this concern of or this need to be more local and to engage local and to see that there's a lot of opportunities to engage like different size of donors, like the citizens, the small company, the big company, the family. So there's a lot of possibilities on articulation, and also there's a recognition of the diversity, diversity and identity, which are so important nowadays. You won't address that needs if you're working just in a national level or in a sort of equal solution for everyone. So you need to have like this evidence base, but then and this is sort of, I would say, more a need that really a thing that a trend that is going on. Mm-hmm. What we're working with Nick, and let me share this, Nick, on this. Developing the community foundations in Chile on my side, but you're working also in Argentina, in Peru, in Colombia, and in Brazil. I think that is a very good news. In the region you won't find still very much of community foundations, but in the last years that we've been working on this and talking to people, it makes a lot of sense. So I think it is now a good time for engaging and a space for engaging with local needs and articulating collaboration.
Thank you, Magdalena. Before because we do need to turn to open it up to the audience, I'll just quickly ask you to describe another thing we're working together on, and that is the idea of to what extent is philanthropy making use of the SDGs as a framework to advance its work both on local levels and still address very global issues.
Oof, I think we need to work harder on the SDGs. Let me tell this little story. When we were working with the Global Philanthropy Report, providing the information from Chile and working with Peru and Colombia, we had this question on the SDG. It was for philanthropists. Do you use the SDG? Do you address the SDG? And we didn't rely on the answers we had from the private foundations, because they say, yes, of course. What is the SDGs? So we didn't include that answer. We said, okay, this is not. And that is something that I think this is a real opportunity. You see, governments and companies are reporting because it gives a good frame on what they are doing locally or nationally is related to a global issue. But I think reporting is one task, but using it really as a strategy tool to identify what are the needs and how you are going to work to address this need is different. And I think philanthropy in the region still has to work to get there, to use it, and not to use it by itself, but to use it articulating it with the. So I think this is a great tool to work with the other sectors. Philanthropy by itself is not going to address any of the SDGs, but it's a common language to work with the public sector, with the private sector in a common agenda. That is the great opportunity for the SDGs.
Yes, thank you, Magda. There's so many good observations and ideas. I'd like to now open it up to start answering other questions in chat. Magda's introduced some things that I think people will love to follow up on. You could tap into her knowledge and wisdom. So let's take it from there.